Welcome to this UC Path online training. Okay, for position funding, we are going to navigate through the PeopleSoft menu. You could go right here to set up HCM, but in this case, we are going to work from the UC Path Work Center. So from the main menu, select Set up HCM, Product Related, Commitment Accounting, UC Customizations, and then Funding Entry. The Find an Existing Value, which this page defaults to, is read-only. It will show you what is currently available. Every new funding is a new value, so you are always going to select Add a New Value to add a new funding entry. Notice the request ID will default to New, and the set ID should default to BKCMP. You can enter the department, fiscal year, budget level, if there is a position pool ID, and the position number. The department here is going to be the best region. If you didn't know what the code is, you could click on the magnifying glass and then search by the description contains best, and then select the code. The position pool is used by the Work Study Office. In this case, we are going to pull up a Research Admin 3 position. It is number 401-46048, and then click Add. Notice the request ID is still new. It won't populate until you select the Save button. This request ID is the same as the transaction ID. Once this number populates, it is a good idea to keep a record for yourself of the number so you can review the status of transactions that you have submitted. In the top left, you will see the request ID, set ID, department, the request status, fiscal year, budget begin date, and budget end date. You will see the level of funding that we are adding. In this case, it is the position level funding. Then below that is the position number, name of the position, and position pool ID if there is one. This position does not currently have an incumbent, so the job data snapshot information is blank. If someone was in the position, you would see their information here. For the funding effective date, I'm going to select November 25th. It is important that both the chart string and position are effective on or before the funding effective date. The position effective date is in UC Path, and the chart string effective date is in the Berkeley Financial System, BFS. Notice the effective sequence is 0 because this is the only funding that has been entered for this specific funding date. This page allows for effective sequencing. If you have two records that are entered on the same slide, the effective sequence shows which record was entered first. It is therefore okay to make more than one update on the same effective date. You will need to enter the new effective date and then update the funding as needed. The effective sequence is to the right of the effective date. The effective sequence will be 0 if this is the first time you have used the given effective date. If the date has been used before, then the effective sequence will go up to sequence 1. The next time the date is used, it will go up to sequence 2. That is how the system knows the order of the records. If you make a mistake and you want to correct it, what you can do is use the effective sequencing. We at Berkeley can't delete a position funding transaction from UC Path. So if a mistake was made on 7/1/2020, and the next day you realize that a mistake was entered and you need to fix it, enter the new position funding record with the same effective date, 7/1/2020. It will automatically have a higher effective sequence of 1. When payroll runs, the system will only look at the most recent position funding with the effective date with the highest effective sequence. It will ignore any previous rows. The paycheck will be cut on the correct information. You have corrected the mistake without deleting anything. If payroll has already run, use a direct retro to move money from the new fund to the old fund. For more information on direct retro transactions, please see that UC Path course. If a position funding transaction that was entered needs to be deleted, create a UC Path case to have the UCPC General Ledger team delete the transaction. Examples of when this might be needed are if personal information was accidentally included in the attachment of the transaction, or if funding for a department was changed and had many downstream effects. In reaching out to UC Path, you will need to justify why the transaction needs to be deleted, rather than just adding an additional row. then UCPC will approve or deny your request. Our status is active and our record status is in progress. We are going to enter the chart string information in the earnings distribution section. As you work more with chart strings, you will become more familiar with the different elements that make up the chart string. You can look up more information on chart strings in the Berkeley Financial System, BFS, or within CalAnswers. What fields are required when entering information on the chart string depends on if the funds are contract and grant, C&G managed, or non-C&G managed funds. For non-C&G managed funds, the business unit, department ID, fund, function, and payroll distribution percent fields are required. Of course, if there is an earn code other than reg, you'll need to enter that too. For C&G managed funds, you will need to enter the fund, department ID, function, business unit, PC project, PC activity, pay distribution percentage, and correct chart field 1 and 2 fields if they are mapped out. For more details, please reference the BFS chart field validation tool. As mentioned earlier, to get more information on chart field values, FAUs, use the Berkeley Financial System, BFS. Keep in mind that BFS does go offline at 9 p.m. each night. CalAnswers can also be used to run a fund report, which will provide the correct FAUs. We have a few job aids that may help you when it comes to position funding. The first job aid shows required UC Berkeley fields for position entry and update. There is also a job aid on how to review the policy on cross-regional funding entry in UC Path. If you're not sure what chart string should be entered, ask your supervisor or someone you are shadowing. The first element is the earn code, and this is what type of pay the chart string will cover. For example, reg pay would be REG or STP for stipend. There is a job aid that shares all of these earn codes. If the only funding line is for regular pay, and there are no other funding distributions that are going to be entered, then the earn code field should be left blank and the system will default it to reg. If you're going to have stipends and other varying earn codes, then you do need to put reg pay in as its own line. Let's say this is a reg pay row with no other funding rows, so the earning code field could be left blank. The GL distribution or unit should be 10000 for Berkeley. The department ID is 32508. Fund 69799, and then the next few boxes can be left blank, up to the function, which is 72. I'm going to leave the chart field 1 blank, and the funding end date should always be left blank. Even if your fund has an end date, the end date is managed in the Berkeley Financial System, BFS. If the end date is entered here, it can cause issues with the funding rollover process at the end of the fiscal year. Now let's talk about the salary cap, multiple components of pay, MCOP worksheet. A link to this worksheet appears on the funding details page below the funding entry information, if it is applicable for the specific position. This is only used at Berkeley for funding that has a cap and the position is filled and is a single headcount position. If all of these elements are present for a transaction, a button will appear at the bottom for the salary cap MCOP worksheet. Only a handful of academic personnel work with this worksheet because of the narrow criteria for it to be used. It is used when the position that is being funded has a salary cap. This means that there is a maximum salary, for example, an NIH fund, if you have to pay someone over the cap. For example, if a salary is capped at $150,000, but the employee is getting paid $170,000, you have to account for which chart string is paying for the additional $20,000. That is where this worksheet comes into use. It lets the UC Path system know what chart string is paying for the salary up to the salary cap and what is paying for over the cap. If the person has reg pay, stipends, etc., it does the calculations for all of that in the worksheet as well. When you've completed the worksheet, the system will show the funding distribution preview page. Here, you can verify whether data is accurate and complete, and to review the applied salary caps and calculated OTC over the cap amounts. NOTC is up to the cap, and YOTC is the amount over the cap. At the bottom of the page, there are 2 buttons, FAU Monthly Preview and the Submit for Funding entry. If the information in the worksheet is correct, click the Submit for Funding entry. If you are going to be using this worksheet in your role, please work with someone in your area to walk through any nuances specific to your area. With this being the only pay distribution, it will be 100% because each earn code needs to add up to 100%. If an additional chart string was going to be used to pay for the reg pay, for example, if 2 chart strings were going to split the funding for a position, then you would click the plus icon to add a second row. The minus can be used to remove a row. Let's say 50% of the regular pay was being funded by 1 chart string, and 50% was being funded by a second chart string. You would enter the information for the second chart string on the second row, and the pay distribution would be 50% for each row. You can also add a blank row that will cover funding for any other earn codes associated with the position. Something you will notice is that the reg codes add up to 100% each, and our blank earn code is also 100%. Remember, we don't care here about the job, whether the employee is half-time, 0.5 FTE, or full-time. It doesn't change how the funding is entered. When we are looking at a vacant position, the job data snapshot is blank. If you are funding a filled position, please reference the payroll calendar to determine if a paycheck was already cut to the employee from the department funding before the position funding was entered. If they were paid, you will need to do a direct retro transaction to move the amount that the employee was paid from the position level funding chart strings to refund the amount that was paid out of the department fund. This is the Add Attachment button. What you attach and when is a department or regional decision. Please be mindful of what you attach though, because attachments are open to anyone with access or auditors to see. Make sure you scrub personal data before attaching a document or email. You can add an initiator comment here. This helps the approver to know why the position funding needs to be approved. Then you can click Save. When you click Save, the system checks to make sure that everything is correct in what you have entered. This also has the request ID populate. The Cancel button appears at this point in the top right corner. If you no longer wanted to complete the transaction, you would need to click Cancel. If an error occurred when you click Save, you will not see the Submit button. Instead, a pop-up message will tell you what needs to be corrected. Once the error is fixed, click Save again and the Submit button will appear. Once you click Submit, it will submit the transaction and you will see the approval workflow at the bottom. The system will send an email to everyone with the potential to approve the transaction. But it is important that you follow the specific process determined in your area to notify the approver, whether that is through ServiceNow or an email. The transaction will be listed as pending in the approval status. I've been skipped as an approver because you can't approve a transaction that you have entered. Up here at the top, the request status is pending approval until the approver approves or denies the transaction. Once the transaction is approved or denied, the system will send an email to you as the initiator. If the transaction has been denied, it cannot be edited and resubmitted, but you can copy the data from the denied transaction to a new one. This will have a new transaction ID number. Fix what the approver indicated in their notes needed to be fixed, attach anything that needs to be attached, and then resubmit. Be sure to jot down your new transaction ID if you are keeping a record of transactions you have submitted, because this will be a different transaction ID than the transaction that was denied. Thank you for watching this microlearning training video. If you have further questions, please review the materials available on the Berkeley UC Path Transactional User Training page, or email us at ucbucpath@berkeley.edu.